Alrighty, everyone. Welcome to today's class, all about multiple offer situations. Let's just drop the hammer on this one. 80 offers on one property in Longmont. We've got to document this. This is the highest I've ever seen. February 24th, 9:18 a.m. because we talked to Sherry about Ignite for 25 minutes. But we have an inventory problem right now, and that means multiple offer situations are happening every single place. And this is a topic that we could probably go over this. I don't know what you think every week, Harry, right now.
Yeah.
Right. It's so important that you guys need to know, you got to know what a multiple offer situation looks like, how it feels, what it is. And we have some people in here that have been battling it. Melissa, Brady, you guys have been battling this market for a little while. And so a lot of what I've been talking to you guys about over the phone is exactly what we're going to talk about today. So first and foremost, with the multiple offer situations, we're going to start from the beginning. And what I mean from the beginning is the consultation. We have to know that we're in a multiple offer situation market. And so we need to make sure that we're explaining what the market is and how it works at the time of consultation. Yeah. Oh, and I just also, since we're recording, I can't figure out why my video is not working. So yeah, bear with me. I'm smiling at you. We have to figure out why the market is doing what it's doing. We have to interpret that, and we have to set that expectation with our clients at the listing appointment or at the buyer's appointment. Now, this video is going to focus more on the buyer side of the conversation. With the listing side of the conversation, it's pretty much the same, except it's a great time to sell, right? But with a buyer, we need to set the expectation in which they don't get scared off and not look to make a move in the market. But we also don't want to rack our brains and go through the situation where you're getting beat out on 8, 9 different offers when the first 5 offers weren't their best offers. You see, when a buyer goes under contract after they've made 8 different offers, most likely there's at least 2 to 4 of the first offers they made that wasn't their highest and best. And a lot of times what that is because I didn't make and set that expectation at the consultation table. So let's pretend like we're in a buyer's consultation, and we need to talk about what the multiple offer situations look like in a delicate manner in which they're not going to walk out of this, Zoom room or this conference room with me and go, my gosh, Bruce just talked us out of trying to buy a house in this market. Maybe we will move back to the Midwest. Maybe we won't, maybe we'll renew our lease. This sounds extremely difficult and hard, right? You got to understand that we got to set some expectations, but you also don't want to burn yourself as well. So when I'm in a buyer's consultation, to recap, the first thing I'm going to do is introduce myself, thank them for coming in. The reason why I constantly thank them for coming in is because if they don't come in and have this consultation with me, it's going to be very difficult out there trying to work with the market, trying to beat the market without this type of conversation. So intro, and thanking them for coming into my buyer's consultation is huge. And I say things such as, look, you wouldn't believe how much time we're going to save ourselves by spending these next couple of hours together. Then I go through and I ask them if they have any questions. I go through and I ask them for their criteria that they're looking for in a home. And then I start talking about market and how the process works. So that's kind of what we want to start with today with this class and multiple offers. We need to set that expectation. So I've gone through, I've got their criteria, and now I want to share with them, what the market's doing, how it's how we got to interact with it and how we got to do it. The first thing that I do is I say, hey guys, I pride myself on helping buyers find a home in this environment. You see, we have an ever-turning market. I love that phrase. We have an ever-turning market. And because we have an ever-turning market, it means that in one fell instance, it may not look like we have quite a lack of inventory. But you see, the reality is that inventory just hits the market and goes under contract quickly. You see, we sold more homes last year than we ever have in our entire history. So when we say a lack of inventory, I think that's the media talking. What it is we have an ever-turning market. And what I want to tell you, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, is that I know how to beat this ever turning market, but I know how to beat that by having this next conversation with you. You see, we got to understand what this market's doing, so that way when you guys go out and you guys find the house that you guys first fall in love with and give me that little Brewster head nod that says, yeah, Bruce, we're gonna be putting in an offer. When you say that, I want you to say that with such confidence and such clarity on what this market's doing, that your offer that you make on the first house that you want to make an offer on is the right offer. And a buyer's going to say, well, Bruce, what do you mean the right offer? And I'm going to say, hey, that's a great question, because you see what happens in when I do this. And if we don't really understand this market right now, what I'm going to see you guys do is fall in love with a house. And the first offer that you guys put in may not be the one that's going to make that to get that property. So let me give you an example here. If you don't know, going out and looking at homes with me, that the market is trending at about 100 to 104% of list price. If I didn't tell you that and you don't understand what that means, you're going to go see a house for maybe $400,000, and you're going to ask me if there's any wiggle room on the purchase price. You see, we got to have this conversation today, because there is no wiggle room on that purchase price right now. I hate to be blunt with this, and I hate to be completely brash and upfront with this, but if I'm telling you that a property is going to be selling for anywhere between 100 to 104% of list price, and that property is at $400,000, now you guys can't see me on the video, but what I would be doing right in front of my buyers, right at the consultation, is pulling out my calculator, typing in 400,000 times 1.04 equals 416. So that's $16,000 over list price is a very common offer for that type of property. And so now I've got my buyers understanding that if they go and look at a property for 400,000, their mind needs to really be looking at that property like it's listed between 415 and 420. And so I would go through that exercise with them. And Brady, I want to role play with you since you're on here with me. So Brady, as you can see, our market is ever turning, and it's also increasing in value because properties are selling a little bit higher than list price. What we need to understand about list price is not the price we need to get stuck into our head. We actually need to understand that whatever you see in list price, just get out your phone and figure out what 104% of that is. And that's right around what it's going to sell for. Now, I say right around, and I say it with such emphasis, Brady, because right around means that's the average. You see, the reality is this 27th Anniversary Lane right here in Longmont had 80 offers on it this weekend. All right. And now there's a lucky buyer out there that absolutely is ecstatic that they got this offer. But you see, the fact of the matter is we got a lot of other things to think about. See, I just told you that we can't focus on the listing price. And there's that reason right there, because we're trending at selling things for over list price. But here's the other number one reason we can't look at list price, Brady. What do you think? I guess, what do you think the other number one reason we can't look at list price is?
Man, I'm not really sure. I guess just because that's the way things are right now.
No, that's great. And I don't expect you to. I just want to see kind of if you understand how homes are priced. You see, the list price is not that important to me, because guess who chose that price?
The listing agent or the sellers?
The sellers, right? Yeah, they signed on the dotted line. Now they have an agent who helped educate them on what the market's doing. But you see, the fact of the matter is that was two people's opinion on where the house should be priced. It may not be the market's opinion. And so you see, if you have a property that's listed for 400,000, but I can go back to my computer and look up comps in the area, and I can tell you that house, actually, I would have never listed it below 425. I'm going to tell you that in this situation, forget about the 104% rule. This property, because there's other agents just like myself who are savvy enough to go and review comps, are going to understand that this is going to go for way more than 416. Because if they listed it at 400,000, and we know that 104% is 416, but I would have listed it at 425, then we have to assume that that property very well could bring a buyer that wants to pay 104% of 425. And you see, that's where we start to see this place in the market where people go, oh my gosh, a house went for $60,000 over list price. Well, the fact of the matter is if list price doesn't matter, why can we sit there and tout that? It should have probably never been listed that low. Now, Brady, on the flip side of this, I know we're talking about, you know, under listing things and going over list price. The other fact of the matter is that there's a property, and so Brady, you could, or anybody watching this video, it is my listing right now, but I have a listing going on right now that is only $15,000 over market value right now, in my opinion, and it is not moving. And this property is listed at 415 and is not moving. But this other property in Longmont got 80 offers on it. So you see, this market is going to be interpreted as we go. But what I really want you to understand is that you cannot get stuck on what the list price is, because there's too many other variables that cause a different sales price. Now, here's the next thing I want to do with you, Brady. I want to go through a couple of sold properties in the price point in an area. So here's what I'm going to do, Brady. I'm going to set up an MLS search. But instead, I'm going to take all of your criteria and I'm going to look at sold properties within your criteria. So this is where, you guys, I would be getting on my computer and if I'm on Zoom, I'd be starting to screen share it with my buyers. I want to go through and I want to open up the MLS and I want to type in all of their criteria, but instead of hitting for sale or pending or under contract, I'm going to hit sold, and then I'm going to go back 3 months. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to point out all of the different properties that did not sell for their list price. And I'm going to hope that I'm going to find a mix. I'm going to hope that I do at least find one property that sold at list price. And then I'm going to hopefully find a property that sold for less than list price. And then in this hot sellers market, I know I'm going to find properties that sold for more than list price. Okay. And I'm going to go through that with them. And what I'm going to look for is the one that sold at list price. You guys, I can almost guarantee that if it sold at list price, it was on the market for more than a couple of weekends before it got an offer. But it probably wasn't on the market for more than a couple of months because it sold for list price. So it's probably in that touchy realm of the seller was really still stuck on their list price, but the list price was a little too high to get multiple offers. Most likely the data is going to show me that. Then I'm going to hopefully find another property that may be sold for less than list price. And most likely that home was on the market for a couple of weekends or more, maybe even a month. I'm coming up on a month with the property that I have for 415 on the market right now. Right? We have some other issues. My house has a cat issue, a cat smell. And that's, in my opinion, what's deterring it. If it didn't have that cat smell, it'd have been gone. We've already had 5 threats of offers. So you can see that the price also needs to be, the house needs to be priced also in reference to its condition. And we won't know the condition, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, until we get to the property, right? So I'm going through all of this stuff with them on the MLS. So I've got it pulled up. So for the sake of this video, let's jump in and just make this real world here. I guess my video is not working, but my screen share should work. So can you guys see Iris?
Yep.
Thanks. Cool. So Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Brady, let's take a look at this search here. So you said you're looking in Longmont. Yes. Let's call it 450 and under is what the lender said.
Yep.
I'm going to go over here and I'm going to do a residential detached. I'm going to go sold, and I'm going to go listing date. And I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to go back a couple months. So I said November 1st. Looks good. You don't have to be super specific with it. I want 450 and under. Now, Brady, if you notice, when I set up searches for people, I don't like to squeeze my commission, is what I call it. I'd love for you to find a house at $100,000. I don't care about the commission. It's all about what you're gonna get. So this is the way I have your search set up: 450 and under, all the way down to 0. You're looking for 3 beds, 2 baths. And let's say that Brady, you're looking for, call it 1,500 square foot or more, and you need a garage. Let's pop in a garage there. We're gonna do a map search, just like I would your search. I love playing this game, Brady. How many homes do you think are gonna pull up?
I'm gonna say 11.
11 homes?
Yep.
I'm gonna say that your search probably is gonna pull up 11, but in here is probably more like 30.
Oh shit, this is sold. I forgot. Yeah, this is gonna be like 30 or 40.
Right on. But hey, that's a good point for this video. So you guys, I like to, during this expectation setting exercise with your buyer, I absolutely want you guys to understand that you're going to be saying things that beat them down, and you've got to add in some liveliness to it. So I love doing that. I love saying, hey, look, I know you guys, just take a stab in the dark. If you hit the nail on the head, I'll buy you lunch. Something like that. Like take some of that, take some of that angst in the air out that you just put in the air. And Brady's not wrong. If we were to set up an active search, now I'm just curious to see if I owe Brady lunch here. I'm so curious.
It's got to be like, I know it's like 11 or something like that.
Did you look this morning? Am I buying lunch for no reason here?
You might be. I did
Dang
look this morning.
Oh, thank goodness.
It's even worse.
I say thank goodness, and there's only 2 properties.
It's really bad.
And there's only 4? Wow. I can't. All right, that's another topic. We're recording. Brewster, stop. All right, I don't know Brady lunch, but we're going back to the solds. So I'm gonna get these 33 properties up. And here's what I'm gonna do. I'm not gonna sit here and go through all 33 properties. Most likely what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit count, and I really don't want 33 properties. That just takes up too much time. So maybe I'm gonna limit and go back maybe just to January. There we go. There's a nice number of homes there. So we got 8 properties, Brady. Now let's take a look here what happened with these properties, all right? Now, if you look over here, this DTO, this is days to offer. So within the first 3 days, they got an offer and went under contract. In my world, I can almost look up here and understand that it sold for more than list price. So I'm not going to go through this with every single property, but sometimes what I'm going to do is I'm going to start to show Brady what I mean by 104% of list price. So if I take 400 divided by 382, I think that's the math. You guys can't see it, but if you do it, it's 1.047. So it almost sold for 105% of list price. So you see, Brady, we got this property over here. It's built in 1954. It went for, gosh, $18,000 over list price. All right. So that's why when I look at this house, I want you to understand that anything listed and the 380s, I want you to instantly think 4 to 410. Let's go look at the next one here, Brady. This one here, listed at 410, sold for 420. So it went 10K over. That's got to be about 102% of list price, somewhere in there, right? Here we go again, $10,000 over list price. 4 days to offer. 4 days to offer, sold for list price. Ooh, this is a little intriguing. Let's dive into this, Brady. So Brady, what I'm going to be looking at here is if it only took 4 days to offer, maybe we got to understand why it only sold for list price. And so let me talk with you through a couple of scenarios here. This could have been a house that they only got 1 or 2 offers in on right at list price. It could have been that the buyers felt like the list price was exactly where it needed to be. So the first thing I want to do is I want to look at price per square foot here. So we got 227. So it was listed at 227 square feet. So let's go back up here to see what these other guys were trending at. there's 284 a square foot, there's 259 a square foot, and there's 211, yeah, 211 to 203. So in accordance with this, it looks like it was priced at a decent price point. All right, it looks like it was priced in comp world. So right off the rip, Brady, I'm also surprised that this didn't sell for over list price. Now, what do you think the other reason that there wasn't a clamoring amount of offers on this house was for?
Maybe what it was like on the inside.
I appreciate that, Brady. You must be a real estate agent. No, but some of your buyers will get it and some of your buyers won't. And you say, well, the only other thing that causes a house not to sell is the price in which you're getting it for, which means condition. So let's go through here. Is there anything that we're looking for? So it's not like super out. I mean, it's not updated. It's not super gross either. But it's also not super updated. So we can only assume a couple of different things with this one. But again, even with it being on the market for less than 4 days, sold for 100 to 104% of list price, still directly in relation. So let's continue on, see if we can find some more. All right, so we got one that sold for $5,000 over list price. Ooh, here's a good one. We've got one that sold for less than list price. So like I said, Brady, this is why when we're having this conversation, I really don't want to put a bunch of negativity in your mind. I really don't want you to think that every single property that you're ever going to be looking at is going to absolutely have multiple offers and sell for way more than things. What I want you to do is I want you to understand that that's the average. So when you see a property that's listed for 400,000, I want you to think 420. When you see a property that's listed in the 380s, I want you to think 405. So that's really what I'm getting at. And if it doesn't happen that way, we'll know right off the rip. And here's how we'll know. So Brady, I'm done with the MLS. I wanna. Does that make sense? Do you have any other questions? I'd go and I'd overlap and I would do all that. I might even, you guys, since we're on number 6, I might go through the next 2 with Brady. Here's one that sold for over list price, not too far over list price. Here's another one that sold for over list price, but again, not $10,000 or more. So Brady, as you can see, it is very common. It's very common to go over list price, but we also have 2 properties within these 8, one in which sold for less and one in which sold for spot on. So like I said, the majority of the time it's going to sell for over list price. But also what I really want you to get at, what I really want you to see is out of these 8, and I know this is only a very small pool, but out of these 8, we didn't see $45,000 over list price, right? So when we're out there, we need to understand that if the house is priced in accordance with the comps, it's probably going to sell for maybe, if it's 400,000, maybe $10,000 over list price, maybe 20. But anything more than that, I would say that the house is probably underlisted if it sold for more than that. So with every property that you want to make an offer on, Brady, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my time and I'm going to go through and I'm going to look at comps. I'm going to see if that's where I would have priced the house. So that way we can get a better understanding of what you should be going in as far as list price goes. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, Brady, I really appreciate you looking at the market because that's the market and we got to understand that. So do you feel confident that when we go out and look at properties, you're not going to be stuck on the list price?
Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. Well, hey, I appreciate that. And if you start to get stuck on the list price and get frustrated by the market, I really want you to kind of, hone in and come back to this conversation that we're having here. You see, I really want you to understand that if you start to get focused on the list price, we miss something in this consultation here today. Great. So the other thing that I really want you to see from that is the market is completely doable. Oh, I can't stand when the media says that this is not a time for a buyer to buy. It is. There is still market pressures. The time to not buy would be to completely overpay for a property. You see, overpaying for a property is not going over list price. What it is the buyers themselves decided that those houses were worth a couple $1,000s over list price. That's all that was. But the buyers didn't say that the house was worth $30,000, $40,000, $50,000 over list price. So this market's so doable. I've been doing it all the time. Trust me, we're gonna go out there and we're gonna be doing the same. But here's the reality, Brady. If people are having multiple offers on that property, there may be a buyer that wants to beat you. That's already been in the market for a little while. Let them have it. We're going to formulate an offer in which you want to make. I'm going to help educate you, and I'm going to help tell you what's going to get that house. But it's all going to be indicative of what we just looked at here. So again, when I see a property and you say, Bruce, my gosh, this is the house for me, and it's listed at 400,000, you got to understand that the next thing you're going to think is, well, where should I go, Bruce? I'm probably going to be in my head somewhere around 420 to 425. Now let's have a 0 and 5 conversation here, Brady. Okay, we definitely need to have a 0 and 5 conversation. You see, a lot of agents, I mean, myself included when I first got started, as well as listing prices and lenders and listing agents and other buyers agents, people in their mind find it easier to think about 0s and 5s. They think that if you're going to list a house at 400,000 and you're thinking to yourself, well, maybe I'll go in at 420. I'm going to tell you to go in at 422, maybe 422.5. You see, what gets houses sold, in my opinion, are not 0s and 5s. So Brady, while we have the MLS open here, I want to go through some of these other numbers, and I want to see if I'm right or wrong. So let's go back. 0 and 5, no, 447. 446. Ooh, there's one, 450 or 445. Now, do you think? Now, why do you think that one went for a 0 and 5? Because it went under list price. They weren't competing. The additive doesn't matter there. We go under list price because I don't know why it went under list price in only 8 days on the market, but it did, right? Ooh, here's one, only 5,000. I'm wrong there. That one went for list price, so that one doesn't count. There we go, 429. There's a 0. Ooh, there's another 0. My gosh, I was wrong 50% of the time. Here's what I'm telling you about my experience is, if you notice, there are a lot of ones that didn't go for a 0 and 5. I can assure you that if you start to think about going just a grand over wherever you're thinking. So if you're thinking 415 on a house, I'm going to educate you to try 416 or 417. Now, here's the other thing that I want you to do. I want you to understand that I'm not trying to push you up to a higher price because I make a bunch of commissions. You see, the $1,000 doesn't make me much. To be honest with you, I'm already going to probably buy lunch. Let's just call it lunch. The reality is the other flip side to that is another $1,000 to $2,000. Your homework for me, Brady, is to talk to your lender and ask them what the payment difference on your monthly mortgage payment would be for just $2,000 increase. And I want you to understand that that's probably like a Starbucks or a cup of coffee. So when we're out there, Brady, I really want you to be prepared to understand that the market's going about 104% over list price. The other thing that I want you to understand is that when you ask me what I think you should go in at, I'm going to tell you to go up maybe a couple $1,000s over a 0 and 5. Does that all make sense so far?
Yeah, definitely.
Awesome. Well, hey, Brady, I appreciate that. That's enough about setting the expectation around the market. I really appreciate that you got to dive into this with me, because here's what I see happen, Brady. We go out, and if we don't have this conversation, I got buyers that don't want to meet with me. Like I said, I appreciate you sitting down with me today, because this is going to save us hours on the road. But you see, the reality is that if we don't have this conversation and we go out and we find that house at 400,000, I might be able to convince you to go over list price, but you might only go up to 402, maybe 405, since we didn't have the 0s and 5 conversation, right? And the reality is that puts you in the running, but I can't tell you it's the best offer for that property. Now, it might be the best offer you want to make for that property, but the reality is that a lot of buyers that don't sit down with me, what happens is they go out and they make offers on the first 2 and 3 houses. And those first 2 and 3 houses are the ones that start to get stuck into their mind. They really get defeated when they find a house they absolutely love, and they didn't make a great offer on it because they just weren't prepared to. You see, I don't want you to go through that heartache, that headache. And so I again, man, I just got to appreciate that you went through all of this with me. I know that was a long-winded kind of topic here. So let's pivot. Let's pivot, right? we talking about multiple offers, and we're only talking about one aspect of the multiple offers, Brady. We're talking about price point. You see, I want to also go through a couple minutes worth of talking to you about what else happens in multiple offer situations. All right. So in multiple offer situations, what's important to a buyer, or I'm sorry, what's important to a seller may not just be price. What it is, it might be timing, and it might be also other guarantees or certainties with your buyer. So Brady, the reason why I win in this ever churning market is because I do what I call a 3-hit punch program. All right. A 3-hit punch program is what I want to go through next. Now, you can add a couple other punches in there, I guess, but I really like to go over these 3 main things that can really help you win an offer. So, Brady, we talked about price a lot. We talked about going over list price. Now, why do you think that things are going over list price? But yet, if we know things are going over list price, why would a seller then price the home under where they think it's going to sell?
Oh, I'm not sure.
Beautiful, because you're not an agent. No, they're exactly, and I don't expect you to know that, but the reality is when you sell a home, and I have to go through this with my seller too. When you sell a home, we need to make sure that we list it in accordance to the comparable market value in the neighborhood. And what that is that's past sold properties. So if our market's still trending upward, then the past sold properties probably sold for a little less than what it would go for today because the market's going up. But that's where they need to list this house is in comparison to the comparable properties. And the number one reason why that should be done is because your lender is going to require you to do an appraisal on that property. And if that property does not appraise for the purchase price, i.e. the contract price, then you as the buyer have every right to stand your ground and not accept the purchase price, but only accept the appraisal value. So the contract says that if the property appraises for less than contract price, buyer gets to stand their ground at appraisal value, but seller gets to stand their ground at contract price. So what happens in this situation, Brady, is some people will meet in the middle. Maybe the buyer comes up a few thousand, the seller comes down a few thousand. Maybe the seller comes down all the way, and maybe the buyer comes up and bridges the gap all the way. You see, it's such an unknown that unknown, there's something we can put into the contract that helps the seller shed some clarity on this, and it's called an appraisal deficit clause. You see, an appraisal deficit clause is a wordy clause that I really want to make sure you know today. An appraisal deficit clause says that if the property's value appraises for less than contract price, you as the buyer are willing to bring up an additional X amount of dollars over the appraisal value. So Brady, let's get nitty gritty with this for a second. Riddle me this: how much money do you have saved up in its entirety for anything that would come up to buy a home? And I'm talking closing costs, inspection fees, all of those things.
I think we've got 40,000 as of right now.
You got 40,000. Okay, that's fantastic. And you got $40,000. So riddle me this: if you have $40,000, how much of that do you plan on using for your down payment on the loan?
I was hoping, maybe somewhere around 10 grand.
Somewhere around 10,000. Okay, perfect. So then you got $10,000 on a loan, and you got $30,000 left to play with. Is that what I hear you saying?
Yeah.
Great. So I'm going to pause there. I want to go over a couple scenarios that I hear from buyers. That is one scenario all the time. Somebody is super realistic. That's a very realistic buyer. They know that everything that they saved up doesn't necessarily go towards their down payment on the property. But then you've got the flip side. Some buyers think that they saved up $40,000 and that is all going to go to the purchase price of the home. And what I mean by that is you have some buyers that say, I've got $40,000 saved up. I want to buy a $400,000 property. And so my loan to value ratio is 360. It's just not the case. They have some other costs involved. A buyer is going to have and understand that they have closing costs and that they have prepaids, and then also that they have inspection and appraisal costs. All of those combined, you can call it anywhere between $5,000 to $10,000, let's call it. So let's just say it's $10,000. So in this situation, Brady actually has $30,000 to play with. So I'm going to talk to Brady some more, and I'm going to educate him on talking to the lender about making sure that he's comfortable with a monthly payment at a $10,000 down ratio or a $20,000 down ratio. So if I slow down a little bit and work that math for you guys, that would mean he's going to have anywhere from $10,000 to $20,000 to play with if we use or choose to use an appraisal deficit clause. Okay. So Brady, an appraisal deficit clause would mean that you have some extra funds over and above your down payment to the loan and your closing costs. So it sounds like you have that, my friend. So according to what I'm looking at, you've got about $10,000 to $20,000 that you could use to help set you in a better stance for your offer. And what I mean by that is an appraisal deficit clause. So we're going to break this down, and I want you to ask me any questions that you have on this, and I want you to stop me at any point I lose you. And for all of you guys on the recording, I want you guys to do the same thing. This is something that will take you guys a lot of time explaining to your clients as well to yourself, because even if you think you have it down in your head, go ahead and try and articulate it, right? We should probably do this in scripts practice sometime.
Yeah,
I went through this with.
Sorry, Bruce.
Please go ahead, Karen.
No, I was just going to say, because I think the other thing that you have to ask in that whole process is, so Brady, how long do you think you want to live in this house that you're going to purchase? Because people have to understand that deficit and that you're in the hole, right? And so if you thought you were only going to live in there 2 years, it might not be it might not be the right house for you at this time, because that deficit you won't be able, unless the market keeps going up, but you just got to have that kind of conversation as well.
Because if they're planning on putting like money into the home, then they might not have that money right away to put into the home.
Well, and on a deficit, it means you're starting with a negative number, right? Excuse me. So you're starting with a negative number, and if you don't live in the house for several years, you've got costs at selling again. You've got your real estate fees and all that, and you're going to have to bring a check to closing. So you brought a check to closing in this one, and then you're going to have to bring a check closing on the other. So I just like to ask that question of Brady, how long do you think you'd want to live in this house? If they say 3 or 4 years, then you're probably going to be okay, right? Anyway, it's just part of that deficit that if I'm working with my buyer, I want to make sure they completely understand what happens when you do that deficit.
Yep. No, I like that.
Sorry, Bruce. Keep going.
No, don't be sorry, because this kind of goes back to what we were talking about with Sherry. We all have different styles, and I'm not right and I'm not wrong. Harry's not right and he's not wrong. Whatever situation we use, guaranteed Harry's been right and Harry's been wrong. You know what I mean? So
probably more wrong than right.
No. And I don't use that tactic. I don't actually go through and tell them that. I only will actually bring that up if they go, well, wait a second. You're telling me to overpay for it for market value? Like, I'm at a loss. I'm at a deficit. Then I'll start to go into it for sure. But yeah. I won't just bring it up to bring it up. But I know people that do, because they you know, it is something that maybe your buyer needs to know or wants to know. I don't necessarily. I just make them feel confident, and if they bring it up, they bring it up. But that's a good point, where you got two coaches sitting in the same room, and we do things just a little differently, and we're not right or wrong, but we are right or wrong most of the time. I like that one. I'm gonna quote that. That's my mindset Monday. You know what? You're right or wrong most of the time.
And I think that's just a comfort thing for me. That's all. I agree with Bruce. If somebody doesn't bring it up, they maybe already understand it. So what's the point of bringing up something that might create some angst for somebody? But
no, I think it's probably me. I just never thought about bringing it up unless they ask, I guess. So anyways, we'll get back on here.
All right.
No.
Got you off target.
Got you off
target. Where in the hell did mine go?
Is it Yogi Bear?
Oh, he says stuff like that all the time.
Right?
Yeah.
So you've got this down payment, you've got these funds, you've got things going on, and you've got some money to play with, Brady. So this appraisal deficit clause, I want to go over in real life, or I guess like real situations I've seen before. Throughout this entire buyer consultation, we've been talking about 400,000. So let's just keep it there. And this is where I want you to stop me at any point in time. Let's pretend that this house was listed at 400,000 and that you as the buyer tell me you want to go in at 410. What do you think my next words out of my mouth are going to be?
To maybe go a couple thousand higher.
Oh my gosh, I appreciate you listening, Brady. Yes, that's exactly right. You know what? My birthday is on 4/12. My birthday is on April 12th. So I'd probably tell you to go in at 412 just because, right? But it goes back to that zeros and five thing. So if you're at $412,000 over list price, the best, now it's not the thing you have to do, but the best appraisal deficit money that you could put up would be $12,000. So when we talk about an appraisal deficit, the best case scenario would be if you're comfortable to put up the exact amount of dollars that you're going over list price, okay? But I also want you to know that in this situation, you maybe feel comfortable with 412 as a purchase, as a contract price, but you might feel more comfortable having about $8,000 for an appraisal deficit clause because of the house, right? So what I want you to understand, Brady, is when we go out there, there's some houses that you're going to love more than others, which is going to make you feel like you need to go well over list price. But what I want to tell you is the houses that you love more than others, I want you to start really consistently thinking about maybe maxing out your tolerable appraisal deficit money. Okay. But so, for this, go ahead.
So if I put 12,000 down, and if somebody else is willing to put only 5,000 down, does that mean I'm going to be in the lead if I do have, that 12,000 as opposed to like 5,000 or 7,000?
It's a really good point. My answer is yes, if the seller is only concerned about their bottom dollar. And let me tell you why I'm saying that. If the seller's only concern is financial, then yes, they're going to take your guarantee of $12,000 over the other buyer's $5,000 guarantee, most likely all day. Now, if you put in an offer at $400,000 with a $12,000 guarantee, and the other offer put in a price of $410,000 with a $5,000 guarantee, they may look at that because that might cause a conundrum to the seller. And that's why if we don't go over list price or right at list price, I probably won't even educate you to put in an appraisal deficit clause. This clause is, I only use this when you go over list price. All right. So yes, if they're concerned with their financial piece, 100%. But if they're more concerned with, obviously dollars are always, a great concern. But if they're more concerned with timing, maybe they would love to have 2 months of time back into the home. And you're not willing to give them that 2 months, but that other $5,000 over appraisal deficit is willing to give them $5,000 over an appraisal deficit plus 2 months free back into the home. That very well may be the kicker for that seller. So we're going to get to that. I really appreciate you bringing up that question because that's actually where I'm going to go in a little bit here. But right now, let's just talk about that appraisal deficit clause. Okay.
Hey, Bruce, can I ask a quick question?
No, I said not to interrupt. I can't even smile. Yeah, I'm joking. I appreciate you guys. I just realized you can't see my face. Go ahead, Sherry. Okay. I sound like a complete ass.
So if you have a buyer who has been approved for $400,000, they don't have enough money to come up with, say, the deficit. I mean, they can't fill in the gap. Do you need to tell them then that they need to start searching in a lower price point with the likelihood that it's probably going to go over that to cap them off at 400? Does that make sense?
Question. That's a great question. It's all going to depend upon what they tell me they have for money. Yep. Okay. So, and here's why I say that, Sherry. So, and I'm just going to do it. Let's say that, so people that don't have money to do this are the people that only have 5% or less for a down payment. Okay, so let me walk you through the reason why. At 10%, you just work with the lender to see if they can qualify for 5% down. And then you use the other 5% as appraisal deficit money. And if you don't end up using the appraisal deficit cash, then you just close with 10% down. But if you're talking to somebody who doesn't have enough money for a down, only has enough money for a down payment, you're talking to somebody who's only has 5% or less. There are programs out there for 3%, 3.5%, and 5%. But chances are, if you're at a 3.5%, you absolutely don't have the money. And if you're at a 5%, you probably are at the baseline of conventional. So the reason why I said it might depend is because what you're going to notice is at a $400,000 purchase, 5% is $20,000. And at a 375 purchase, it's 18,750. So if you were to use that scenario or that method, Sherry, you would need to be looking $25,000 less, and you still are only going to be able to make yourself have a $2,250 appraisal deficit clause or appraisal deficit cap money.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So you could do it, and you can look at a house that's a lower in price point, but the fact of the matter is you only have $2,200 over the appraisal deficit. So you're still very easy to beat into another buyer. Another buyer might have 5 and they'll beat you all day. Gotcha. And then to a seller, $2,200 over an appraisal deficit. Yeah, it's a nice guarantee, but it's only a nice guarantee if you're the only one guaranteeing it.
Okay. Makes sense.
Yep. But good question. Good question. So Brady, yeah, $400,000 house. We're going to go in at 412. Let's pretend that you're willing to commit $8,000 on this. Let me walk with this through how this would work. Okay. So best case scenario, it appraises for 412 or higher. That means we move on, and that $8,000 that you were willing to put up, you now can keep that in your pocket or choose to put it towards your down payment on the loan. Okay, so that's the best case. But we're talking about an appraisal deficit. So if the appraisal comes in less than $12,000, you're going to have to exercise that clause. So if the property appraises, we'll go through 3 scenarios here. If the property appraises at $400,000, do you know what you would pay for the home?
400.
That's a great question. If we put in an $8,000 appraisal deficit clause, what you would actually pay for it would be 408. So your loan amount would be based upon 400,000. So if you have 5% saved up for 400,000, that means you're out of your 40,000, you're going to put $20,000 on the loan, and then you've got about $10,000 in closing costs, inspection fees, and all of that, just give or take, right? And so that extra $10,000, you're going to have to use that other 8,000. So now your down payment when you get to closing is going to be 28,000. Okay. If the property appraises at 408, what do you pay for the? Oh, I'm so sorry, Brady. Let me do this because I'm recording and I forgot. What I would be doing on a Zoom, you guys, is I would be going into our office clause manual. So for everybody that's out there, if you're in the Longmont, Loveland, or Firestone office, or yeah, Longmont, Fort Collin, or Firestone office, and Loveland, my gosh, you're going to go to your market center intranet. So go to mykw.kw.com. Okay. Scroll down here to this quick link for your intranet. Then you're going to go to Market Center. You're going to go to Documents. You're going to go to So they're all kind of different. So this is where you start to have to find it. But what I'm looking for is I'm looking for something called the clause manual. If you don't see it in here, you might go to the Market Centers hub or just keep fumbling through. Each Market Center is a little different. So if you're in the Longmont office, you're going to go to Documents, KW First Realty, Legal Documents, and then it's the second one down here. Okay, you're going to get that downloaded. It opens quickly here. All right, so before we go into this, I need to take and grab a quick water here. I'm running out of steam with my vocal cords here, and I need to take a leak. Let's take a pause. I'm going to stop the recording for a second, go to the bathroom, get yourself a drink. I need a fresh cup of coffee. All right, so this is the clause manual. This is what you guys are going to be using in your contracts. Before we look at this clause for appraisal deficit and some of the other clauses we're going to use to wrap up this class, I want you guys to understand that you're going to see clauses, especially if you're on the listing side of things, or maybe even on the buyer side of things for a counter proposal, you're going to see some different clauses that come through from other agents. What I want you to understand is that you can only use the clauses that our attorney has drafted or clauses that you draft and run to ground. You cannot copy and paste and use other agents' clauses. Okay, those clauses, most likely, if you want to use another agent's clause, it was created by them and is only enforceable by them, or wouldn't hold up in a court of law if you just stole it, because they're not an attorney. And then also, most clauses that you want to steal are attorney drafted. Well, that attorney drafted them with the understanding that that office paid for it. So that attorney would never back you up in a court of law and probably would sue you for some sort of plagiarism. So if you're thinking about capturing or figuring out a clause that you love, that you would love to see it, you need to send it to leadership, and you need to understand that we have to go through a process to get it approved and basically probably rewritten by our attorney to accomplish the same things. So if you're using copy and pasted clauses from other contracts, be careful. And I suggest not doing it. What you need to do is understand that if you like a clause and you have the ability to create your own clauses, tweak it, make it your own, because you can write your own clauses. The key with writing your own clauses, though, that you should know too, is that if it ever goes to a court of law, you better make sure that there's no holes that can be punched in that clause, that what you're saying is identical to what you meant, and it could never be interpreted a different way. So I'm going to scare you guys a little bit on clauses. If you're writing them, you have to be sending them to Harry and I for review. And if we don't know it, we're going to probably send it up the chain to Jesse and Jennifer Kelly and all of our managing brokers.
Yeah, and I just want to make sure everybody understands that at some point, if it seems new or something that I've not come across, I am going to spend the time to send it to Jesse, so it could take a little bit longer than normal. But I usually let you know that. I'll say, hey, I'm going to run this by Jesse because I just not run through it yet.
Yep. Bingo.
So, and that's to save all of us, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's to protect you, it's to protect your buyers or sellers, and it's to protect the office as well and us.
Yep. Bingo. Okay. Any questions on clause manuals? Cool. This one, the reason why it's in a Longmont office under the attorney docs is because this is what our attorney has drafted for us. This contract was prepared for by Damian Cox Legal Counsel, exclusive brokers used with the clients of Cox Law Firm. It is not for any other use. Every single attorney has these clauses when they send it out to their offices. So again, be careful. Melissa, I just finally remembered the last one I saw. Melissa got countered with a wordy appraisal deficit clause. And appraisal deficit clauses you need to understand that they don't really have to be that wordy to accomplish what you're looking for. That one was so wordy, but I ended up getting through it. It made sense to me. I ran it to ground and it was no different than ours. It just was more words. So you're going to look, there's a lot of different things that you guys can do. Rebate to buyer. A lot of people don't even know we can do that. But for the sake of this video, let's get right down to our appraisal deficit clause. Where is that thing at?
And if you're going to do it's funny that he just brought that up. If you're going to do a rebate to the buyer, I always run that by Jesse, and he likes to put out a letter that goes with the contract that states that the office, the KW real estate office, agrees with this and accepts this as part of the deal. And you don't think it happens, but I had a buyer $500. They were so stuck on only paying $416 for the house, and they kept coming back as $416,500, and they didn't want to do the deal. And so Jesse said to me, "Give them the $500." And I'm like, "Oh, okay, I can do that." "Yeah, you can do that." "Okay, great." So $500.
Well, I guess for the sake of the video here, the appraisal deficit clause says that should the buyer, or should there be an appraisal deficit, a buyer is willing to bring X amount of dollars over. I know where it's at. I copied it over here. All right, so we're looking at this guy here, right here. Regarding section 6.2 of the contract, buyer and seller agree that if the property appraises below the agreed upon purchase price, buyer shall bring an additional $7,500 over any appraisal deficit, but not to exceed the purchase price. So that clause, that little $7,500 there, you can change that, right? Remember, you can change your own attorney's clauses. Just make sure that if you're changing it, you understand what you're changing, and you understand you're liable if you don't run that to ground. Okay. But that's something that's easily changed, right? Because you're not really changing the meaning of the clause, just the dollar amount. So, and if anybody on here wants me to send it to them, just send me an email after this and I'll send you all of these different clauses here. So this is the appraisal deficit clause, Brady. And so again, in our situation, what we're talking about is if you go in at a 412 with an $8,000 deficit and you already answered it, 400,000, you pay 408. Now, if it prays for 408, what do you pay?
408.
That's a great question, or a great statement. You're actually going to have to exercise about $4,000 of that $8,000 appraisal deficit. The reason why is because we said not to exceed the purchase price. So if it comes in at 408 and you have an $8,000 appraisal deficit clause in there, what you're going to do is you're going to put all the dollars on top of that until it hits the purchase price. So that would be $4,000. We move on, we get to closing. Now, if the property appraises for, say, 390, what do you pay? Because it's less than the listing price.
Would I pay 400?
You'd actually pay 408. So the reason why I like my appraisal deficit clause in there is because it has no floor. So we have a ceiling of the purchase price, but it has no floor on it. And so what I want you to know is that some selling agents will have a clause that kicks back to us and says, basically, yeah, we agree to the $8,000 appraisal deficit money, but if the property praises for less than list price, buyer and seller would go into negotiation, because the seller's basically saying, look, we're confident at list price or above, but if it comes in less than list price, we don't really like your appraisal, and we don't want our seller to be in a bad place. So I'm going to use this because I represent you and I really want them to understand that you're willing to do that. But some sellers are savvy enough to understand that a floor needs to be placed into the contract as well. So if that clause comes over, we'll review it, we'll look at it, and we'll move on. But does that make sense? If you pay $408 for the property, or if it appraises for $408 and you pay $4,000, you're going to pay your 5% of the $408 plus the $4,000 to bring it up to the $412.
Gotcha.
Great. You see, that's the clause, Brady, that really helps buyers win houses, because it assures the seller some financial money. The other thing that a seller may ask you through all of this, Brady, is if they can have some time left in the home. So let's talk about this, because this, when crunch time happens, Brady, words can be taken one way and they need to be looked at in their entirety. The first time that I ever told a buyer that I recommended that they let the seller live in the house for 2 months, for like 60 days for free, my buyers looked at me like I was Medusa, like I was growing stuff out of my head. And what I want you to realize is I play this psychological game called real estate. When I say that you want to give a buyer or a seller time back in the home for free for 60 days, I want you to know that nothing's for free. And I want you to understand that psychologically speaking, you are going to pay some money during that time, right? You're going to be owning the property. So that's when property taxes start to hit. You're also going to have a mortgage payment around that second month. So what I want you to do is understand that to a seller, you're giving that to them for quote unquote free. But in your world, what I want you to understand is that you're going to want to make an offer where your offer price understands that you're going to have some of that money shell out. Now, it's psychological. So when I told you that you might have to give up some free time back in the home, Brady, how'd that feel?
Not great, but I guess I can understand.
Perfect. And that's exactly why I bring it up now, because it's a psychological thing that says, I'm already paying over list price for this house. I'm probably putting down this appraisal deficit money. And now Bruce wants me to give them free time back in the home. Like, who is this guy? The reality is it's psychological for everybody. So the seller, if you gave them an offer of $410 and you charge them $2,000 in the home to basically for those 2 months, let's say you charge them $1,000 a month, to the seller, you're charging them money. And so it's psychological to them, just like it is to you when I said free. So instead, what I would encourage you to do, if that doesn't feel right to you, why not go in at $408 and give them the free time back in the property? Because remember, it's $2,000 either way to you, but for them, it's psychological, and they may like the idea that, yeah, it's a little less than that, but here's the coolest part, Brady, they never saw your offer at $410. That was just in your head. So they believe that your highest offer is $408 with free rent back. Psychologically speaking, that will help if another offer comes in at $410 and wants to charge the seller $2,000. You see how that works?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Great. So that's the other thing that may happen. Okay. So when I ask you to give it to them for free, it's not because I want you to beat yourself up. I want you to understand that money shifts in different ways and that we need to take our emotion out of things, and that free isn't necessarily free. Just make sure that that free reflects on your offer price, but to a seller, it's going to psychologically help you. Cool. So that's only if they want some time back. We also talked about an appraisal deficit, and Melissa was going to bring up, and I forgot to mention, what happens if you don't have any money? So what happens if you have a seller or a buyer that doesn't have any money? So Brady, we're not role playing anymore, but you don't have, you got a buyer that doesn't have any money, right? They have 3.5% down, plus they have $2,000 or let's call it $4,000. They have $4,000 for closing costs, inspections, and all that stuff. The lender had to do everything in their power just to get them to be able to only come up with $4,000 for the seller or the closing costs. So these people are scraping like exactly 3.5%. They have exactly the closing cost amount. What do you do and how can you use it? Hey, Kama, can you take this and just take some notes for me? Kama, hey, can you take this and just take some notes for me? It's super important. I got to figure out what's going on today. Okay. Oh, was somebody going to talk?
Oh, sorry. I thought you were actually asking the question. Go ahead.
Oh, well, I can if you have an answer.
Well, one solution that our lender came up with was they could actually pay like a higher interest rate and then reduce their closing costs, so they would have a little bit more money there.
A higher interest rate to reduce their closing costs?
Yeah. So rather than buying points, they're like essentially like selling interest rate points. So instead of paying like 3%, maybe they're going to pay 3.25, and then they have lower closing costs with the lender.
Where the heck did you learn that?
From the lender. Is that not right?
Oh gosh, it's completely right. It just
Okay.
shows me that you're really asking the right questions and that you're going through and working through some different things. My mind's blown away right now because that's usually something that I know and other people don't know. So that's awesome, Melissa. Does everybody understand what she just said? Okay, sometimes people make decent money. They just stink at saving. What are you guys texting back and forth? Caleb, what are you talking about? Some people make decent money. Some people don't have a debt to income ratio issue. And sometimes it's just a spending issue. And so oftentimes you can have a buyer who will absolutely be able to basically, yeah, like Melissa said, raise their interest rate to reduce their closing costs. So maybe they can take that closing cost and take it from $4,000 down to $1,000 or something. Now they've got $3,000 worth of an appraisal deficit clause. Now, statistically speaking, if we go back through those sold properties that we just looked at with Brady, there was only one house that sold for list price and there was only one house that sold for under list price. So the reality is you can go out there and compete with that $3,000 and it's just going to take a little while to stick. So if that was the situation, what I would do is I'd say to Brady, I said, expect to get beat out on a few things and it's going to be perfectly fine. Because the reality is that eventually it will stick. So are you willing to grin and bear it with me? Because I feel very confident we're going to be able to get this done. It's just a matter of time. So you just can't get hurt out there. And that's the way I'd have that situation. Now, fantastic, Melissa. I'm simply blown away on that. That's something that I didn't know. Most lenders don't even tell us that you can do that. It took me a long time of working through this market to figure that out. What's another one? This is a little bit more obvious. That was like the hardest one I had in my book of tricks.
The other option that we're looking at, and this might not be the road you're going down, but new builds, so you're not competing with other people.
Well, actually, that is in my list of things. So let's tag on that for a second. Not just new builds, but things that cause us not to have to go over list price. New builds, the prices are setting there. They don't do bidding wars. You go in, you like a property that they have and they have the inventory, you put your earnest money down, it's yours. Even if they have sharks circling in the water, they're not going to go like, well, we got 3 other buyers interested. We're kind of waiting to see who's all interested. And, go ahead and tell the builder wants to know which buyer wants to pay the most for this house. They don't do that. Very good. What is another tactic that I use? And I've told a couple of you this. Let's see if you can remember it. What's another tactic for when a buyer's getting beat out a bunch?
Stuff that's been on the market for a while.
Yeah.
Bingo. Exactly. So what happens, and this is it, our minds are the most important things and the most powerful things in the entire universe of our world, right? In our world, in the literal world, the most powerful thing is water. But in our world, it's our minds. This psychological game that our buyers and sellers play is unreal. So what happens is a buyer will go out, they'll look at 7 houses that weekend, they'll make an offer on the one that they like the most, then they get beat out. Can you guys still hear me? My buds are going dead. Then they get beat out, and their second offer, the second house that they also liked, they don't go back to it. So whenever a buyer gets beat out, ask them what their second favorite home was and see if that's still on the market. Ask them what their third favorite home was and see if that's still on the market. And if none of those are on the market, then you're going to go through the MLS, and I want you guys to take their search, and I want you to find all the properties that have been on the market for at least maybe at least a weekend, and most likely 2 weekends or more, because they passed it up. They might have already seen that house. They might have semi-liked it, but they got so enamored by the other one that was already done, by the other house that had all the bells and whistles, that they're still stuck on. And the only thing you need to say on that end is, you know, hey guys, I know you guys love that house. I know you guys kind of fell for it, and I know we didn't get it. And it's really hard to kind of make your mind shift away from that. But the reality was that house, it wasn't attainable. And I don't mean that to sound negatively, but it wasn't attainable. So we got to get over that quickly. We got to pivot. You see this house over here? I remember going through this with you. I thought that was a decent house. Have you guys thought about maybe if I would go and ask the seller if they would, you know, maybe give you guys some concession, some money off of the purchase price, because it does need some paint and some carpet? If that thing had brand new paint and carpet, would you guys buy that house? Let's go see it. Let's go work through this. I've sold a lot of houses to people because it was just the house that was passed up that first weekend, and all of the other buyers that saw it the first weekend never circled back around to it. And the new buyers that come out that next week, they're going to go see that house too, because it's new for them. But a new batch of homes came on the market, and they're going to also be enamored by all the other homes that have all the bells and whistles. And because they're just getting started, they're not going to go look at the house that needs carpet and paint. So our buyers can absolutely circle back around. You can start painting that vision to them. The other thing that I've done, you guys, is I'll go through and I'll take the square footage of the home, and I'll say, okay, great. Are we in agreement that this home isn't 100% carpeted? Perfect. But let's pretend it is 100% carpeted. Let's pretend that you go down to Home Depot and you buy carpet at $2 a square foot plus pad. Let's call it $250 or $275 a square foot. Take that square foot of that home, times it by $250 or $275, and show them that to replace carpet for the entire home would only cost X. And then say, look, you don't have carpet everywhere. The bathroom tile looks fine. The laminate in the front room looks good. The kitchen's fine. So it's actually going to be less than $3,000, or it's going to be less than $5,000, or whatever they're thinking is going to cost so much money to do carpet eventually, right? And then you say, well, maybe the seller would be willing to give us some of that let's say $5,000 to replace all the carpet, which is a lot of carpet. That's an extreme amount of carpet. We might say, hey, if you guys like this, what if the seller in a way can pay for that carpet for you? Now you're going to actually go to Home Depot and put your credit card down, but what if the seller could almost give you that $5,000? Is that something that would cause you to want to make an offer on this house? Fantastic. Let me call the listing agent. Let me see if the sellers are now willing to maybe budge on maybe not price, but on a seller concession type of situation. And then you work through that. The other way that I work with people that don't have appraisal deficit money is I start to educate them on what gift funds are. Lenders are busy right now. Lenders are doing refis left and right, especially with the new news that just hit. Lenders are absolutely over inundated with refis, and now that the interest rate hike prediction just hit, I bet you refis are even going to be more and more prevalent right now, because you've got some people that just haven't got around to the refis, just are like watching the interest rates and really making sure that they can capitalize on the dip. They're going to start calling your lender. So your lenders are not.
Can't hear you, Bruce.
Can you hear me? Hello?
Now we can.
Running out. Your lenders aren't going to have all this time to make sure they're crossing their T's and dotting their I's, and I don't blame them. It's up to us to work with them, and we need to talk about gift funds. Some lenders will not have the time to talk to your buyers and ask them about gift funds. So you need to do that. What a gift fund is a direct relative can gift the buyer some funding. Now it's called a gift. Now you need to let your buyers understand and know that, can you hear me still? Okay. Your buyers need to understand and know that when they talk about gift funds, whether or not there's some secret, society where they're going to repay that person back, it's a gift. It's not a loan. Their parents or their direct relative has to be willing to give them that money with no guarantee of payback. You cannot use it as a loan because then the debt increases. It's a gift. Sometimes parents and grandparents and maybe children will be willing to. You can't hear me?
Oh, you said parents and I went like this.
Oh.
Been there, done that.
Oh, you've gifted before. I got you. I thought you were showing us your white hairs.
I still have it.
I know, I'm jealous. So,
but, to save time on that, Bruce, really quick, just
do it.
I will tell you that if your buyers are gonna do that, I suggest they start the letter process now, so it'll save time when a lender hits them with get a letter. So it can save time, and so I would just tell them my buyers that, hey, listen, the lender's probably going to ask for a letter to show that it was a gift. So why don't you go ahead and work with your parents to get that now?
Bingo. That's a great call. That's a great call. That's why we have it during, that's why we do it and have it during, these expectation calls, these expectation things. It's called the consultation. So you can get it started before you're out there scrambling at the last minute. The last thing you want your buyer to do is fall in love with a house, convince themselves that their parents are going to have no problem gifting them $7,000. And then they get all excited. And then the parents are rational. They're listening. They're, not as excited. And their kid's coming to them, blindsiding them with a $7,000 request. The parents then could go, like, whether or not they're willing to do it, they could see that so much excitement is on their kid's face. They start to wonder if their kid is making the wrong move. They start to get involved. They start to say, I want to see the house. But if you have that gift fund signed when everybody's calm and rational, then you don't have to get the parents in the way. Parents are some of the number one deal killers that are out there because they're protecting their offspring. And there's not wrong. It's just, that's what happens. And especially when the son or daughter is real excited and needs this house, wants this house, needs $7,000. Next thing you know, the parents are like, well, why do you need it? Well, we want to go $7,000 over list price. And the parent has never been in a multiple offer situation in their entire life. They're going to start to think that their kids are crazy. They're going to start to think that their real estate agent's crazy. So if you can have that gift funds conversation up front, then they can relay to their parents what the market's doing, why they're asking, those types of things. Great point, Harry. All right. So that's about the only ways that I know to come up with funds. It has to be gift funds. It has to be through the lender, and gift funds only can be accomplished through direct relatives. It can't be a friend who just won the mega lottery and gift them money.
Because Melissa had that issue, I think, not too long ago. And most lenders will assume that that's going to be a payback, and they'll want to add that to the debt ratio column.
Yep.
So it'll if you were at a 28% now, it could make it up to a 30. And so then you could get turned down for that loan because of that. So friends aren't as good as relatives and parents.
Bingo. All right. So we talked about appraisal deficit. Let's get into the other two clauses. We'll finish this up and we'll get you guys out of here before 11. The next thing that I think, and this is starting to be my opinion, I know for a fact the number one clause that people are using right now to get contracts accepted is the appraisal deficit clause. I would say that in my opinion, the next clause that's getting things done is this as is with all faults clause. What this one says, it's so funny, I know, because I think Harry and I are going to say the same thing here. This clause is a beauty clause. And what I mean by beauty clause is this does not need to be put into the contract.
Yeah.
What it is, it's a psychological clause. If you put this into the contract, it can make the seller feel all excited that you're going to buy the property as is. I want to show you guys that this still gives the buyer the right to do an inspection, and it still gives them, the buyers, the right to back out under section 10 if it's not satisfactory. So some people call this a pass or fail clause. That's definitely what I kind of call it. It tells the sellers that you're willing to buy the house as is, and that you're not going to ask the sellers to fix anything. You guys, there's a better way to do this in the contract, and I want to show you that.
Go to dates and deadlines.
Yes. It's a fluff clause. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean your buyers have any other rights than they normally do if you still keep in the inspection objection and inspection termination deadlines.
Yep.
So Jesse talked about this at his class too, just keeping in the inspection termination and taking out the inspection objection. But I'm always worried that agents don't maybe notice or like understand that. So they see that clause in other offers and then not in ours, even though we reflected in the dates and deadlines. Would it be beneficial to have it in there even if you take the deadline out for objection?
Bingo. Okay. Is it beneficial? No. As far as pen to paper goes, it means absolutely nothing. But remember what I said, psychological.
Yep.
Okay.
Anything I can do to win the psychological game, I'm putting that sucker in there.
Yeah.
Okay.
You can put the as is clause in there. It has no value.
Right here. Here's why.
But it's like Bruce just said, if they're not paying attention to dates and deadlines, and the only thing they care about is the closing date, then having that in there flags them. Oh man, and they're not gonna object to anything. That's not true.
Right.
Okay.
So Melissa, you're not wrong. If I'm working with a buyer, 100% this clause is going into additional provisions. If I'm working with a seller, I know that I get to talk to my seller about that this means nothing, and I'm going to show them section 10.2 and 10.3. And then the first place my eyes are going to go if I'm reviewing an offer is whether or not they have inspection objection or inspection resolution deadlines in. So when I'm on the buying side, I'm going to put in the clause in the additional provisions, and I'm only going to put in a termination date.
That's right.
And that is what is actually telling the sellers you're not going to be asking them to fix or do anything.
And at the end of the day, right? Let's say the furnace is bad and you think, hey, I don't want to spend $10,000. You can negotiate. You can call that seller in and go, look, we're going to have to terminate because of the furnace, unless we want to do an amend and extend and you guys want to fix that, or we want to do an objection. Excuse me, I meant to say objection. And then you guys say, yes, you're going to fix it. A lot of times the seller's agent will go, hey, let me call my sellers, I'll call you back.
Hang on a sec. I'm dealing with an issue. I'm just going to go on mute for a sec.
So does everybody understand that? So you still have options there. And I've seen a lot of the contracts lately where it's just the termination deadline, because it still gives you the right to negotiate. At the end of the day, you still negotiate. And do you want to kill it, unless it's something major? Like I just did one and it came back that the whole foundation was it was going to be $15,000, $20,000. And they were going to take it as is how they put it in there, and they had to terminate. We actually did a termination. They didn't want to fix it, which means they're never going to be able to sell the house. It's just silly.
Sorry, I didn't hear any of that, but
sorry.
What Harry said.
We're done.
So this as is clause, buyers put it in there, use termination deadlines. Sellers on the selling side, if you see it, jump straight to dates and deadlines. Mm-hmm. So that way you know whether or not they're actually looking to make this an as-is contract or not. Mm-hmm. Here's another one that I prevalently use in a seller's market. And again, this little number can change. Buyer waives the correction of any unsatisfactory condition costing under $1,500. If corrections are estimated to cost over $1,500, seller shall have the option of A, to credit the buyer, blah, 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 blah. Now, The reason why this one I like on the buyer side, but I cannot stand on the seller side, is because it opens the seller up.
Mhm.
It says if corrections are estimated to cost over, seller shall have the option of A, credit the buyer, or B, complete
Fix
all
it.
corrections. It
Yeah.
commits the seller to doing something that you can get an estimate for. So this one, if I'm on the seller side, I'm deleting this all day, every day. If I'm on the buyer side, I might try and sneak it in. But in this environment with this many different things going on, you don't want to shoot yourself in the foot. So you might add a little blurb on the end of it that says, instead of saying buyer shall have A, the right to credit the buyer the cost, complete all corrections, I would put C in there. I would put negotiate with buyer.
Yeah.
That way you're not committing the seller to having to credit the buyer or complete it, right? That's what it you know what I mean? You're committed, that seller's getting committed to doing things. So if there's anything that costs over $1,500, which I don't know who in their right mind can't go get a contractor to just put something on an invoice that costs more than $1,500. So if I'm writing this up with a buyer in this environment with 80 offers on the table, I'm putting in C. Now, if I'm in an environment where maybe there's only 1 or 2 offers and it's still a seller's market, I'm going to show the seller that I'm not looking to nitpick, but if there's something major, we are looking to negotiate.
Hey, Bruce, send me this whole thing, because I'll put it out later so that we're all consistent with what type of language we're trying to use. And then I'll have it on file as well.
Well, I will. And I don't want to precurse with, we're still working on making sure that all 3 market centers clause manuals are very
That's right.
much
That's
the
right.
same.
I know that.
So I'm happy to share this out because our attorney did all of these for us. But bear with me because I think some of the clause manuals have some things that are different. I think there's newer ones. I'm still using these because they
Yeah,
still
and
work.
I have the other ones, Bruce. I just don't have long months.
Cool. I just want to precurse with,
yeah,
we're going to send it out, use them because they're within our office. But if anybody else asks you for them, you can't really give them out. They can't use them.
Right.
And then you don't use anybody else's either. So yeah, I'm happy.
That's right.
So the next one, and then we'll
Good
finish
point.
up.
Excellent point.
Yep. Well, next one, and we'll finish up for the day. This is called an escalation clause. It's number 4. I'm not going to, why are you laughing, Harry? Go ahead. I love when people laugh because I laugh at this one too. Okay, I'll explain.
No, I was just going to, I laughed because when you do the escalation clause, you're basically telling the seller that you're willing to pay more for the house. You just have to be careful with that one because it's sort of a catch. It can help in this multiple offer situation, but can also make it so that you're going to be paying more for the house no matter what, right?
Yep. If anybody makes an offer on my properties with my seller with an escalation clause, guaranteed I'm going to convince my seller that it's in their best interest to counter you with the deletion of this clause.
Yep.
And counter you with a price that is your max.
Yep.
I can get my sellers to do that almost every time.
Absolutely.
So here's what the escalation clause is, which is why I believe, and this is completely my opinion, that this is the lesser of the 3 types of strategies for multiple offer situations. But it does work. And here's what I'll precurse with. The reason why it works is because all you have to do is call the other side and you start talking to them, ask them, how many offers do you have? When are you guys accepting offers? Can you play the hot and cold game with me? Can you tell me where the highest offer is? Can you tell me what the highest appraisal deficit offer is? Hey, have you ever heard of escalation clauses? Are your seller and you looking for escalation clauses, or do you guys not believe in them? And you get it. Because if somebody asks me that, I'll go, yeah, trust me, I'm the agent that if you're going to send an escalation clause over to me, most likely if you're the winning offer, because of that highest number, I'm going to counter you with that.
Yep.
And you're going to get the same answer from other places. They'll go, some agents will be like, yeah, of course. I use the escalation clauses all the time. Great. I'm going to use one then, because they're not the type of agents that's going to counter me on it.
Yeah.
But if you get an agent that's like, yep, absolutely not. Those just muddy the water. Those make things complicated. I can't stand those. please don't send your offer with one of those. I'll say, great. I'm actually not that type of agent either. I don't care for them. However, there's some agents that really love them. And so I want to tailor to your needs. I appreciate you not being that agent. I'm going to submit my highest and best to make sure that this offer is clean for you guys. Again, it's my opinion, as you guys can tell through my biased tone with this. This clause hurts you more than it does most, unless the only way it helps is when you have an agent who doesn't do what I do, who likes these, who uses these, who thinks they're the bee's knees. That's the only time that I ever use these. So for those of you that's watching this recording, you're going to go, well, guys, explain this to us. What, you guys are just talking about it. What is it? An escalation clause is what you would consider more of like an auto bidding clause for your contract. So the scenario that I'm going to roll with is Brady and I scenario. House is listed at 400,000. Buyer is willing to pay, let's call it 417. Buyer's willing to pay 417, but buyer doesn't want to overpay for the house, and buyer wants to go in at 408. What this clause is going to say is buyer's going in at 408, and if any other offers beat 408 but are in between 408 and 417, buyer is willing to pay $1,000 over that price, not to exceed 417. So if the buyer comes in at 408 and another buyer comes in at 411, this clause would automatically put this contract in at I lost the number I just said.
412.
412. Okay. Yes, it would be $1,000 over whatever I said. I think I said 411. 412. Then if the other offer has an escalation clause in it too, then theirs is going to go up to 413, which means yours automatically goes to 414, which means the other one automatically goes to 415 until it runs out anyways. So it's another reason why I don't use this thing, because if you have two buyers putting in offers with this, well, you guys can't see my hands. It's just going to stack on top of each other until one of them hits their max. And then there's your max anyways. So it's an auto bid. It's for the buyers that really are reluctant to put in their highest and best. And it's something that I don't use all the time unless the other agent wants me to use it, because they blatantly said they love that clause.
And I love those words, auto bid. It's so perfect.
Yep. So the last thing I want to talk to you guys about, and we'll get you off here unless Harry or anybody else has any questions, is just, I keep saying this, the highest and best. Okay. You guys have seen a bunch of my classes. I teach you guys what questions to ask the agents in multiple offer situations and all of that stuff, right? But let's pretend that the other side says, Bruce, I'm tired of this market. My sellers don't want to go back and forth. I need your buyers to put in their highest and best. I need to know, and you need to know, how to interpret that to your buyer. So highest and best means that you need to put in what your buyer considers their top dollar. Meaning if somebody else paid $1,000 more for the house, your buyers would feel super comfortable not getting that house because they've reached their throw-up point. So this is how I say it to my buyers. I say, hey, when we're out there and when we're looking at making an offer on different properties, the first offer that you make, I need you guys to understand what highest and best means. And Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I call it your throw-up point. It's the point in which you get to a number in your head that causes nausea, that causes you to want to throw up if you have to put any more money down. And I'm going to help you go through those exercises when we start to make offers. Okay, so if you find a property that you want to purchase and it's $400,000, and you tell me, hey, Bruce, I think my highest and best offer is $417. I'm going to ask you how you feel if somebody else closes on that. If we don't get the offer, 30 days from now, a little Zillow ticker comes across your email and says, look at these recently sold homes in the area. And you find out that home sold for $418. Are you going to throw up now? Because you really could have paid that? Or did you hit your throw up point to the point where you would have never given them that 418? And now that you've seen that it only sold for $1,000 more, you are still perfectly fine with it. You might have a little angst in your voice, but you're fine with it because there was no way you were paying 418 for that house.
Great point. Great point.
Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, that is called your highest and best. So here's what I want you to understand. Most of my buyers that really beat themselves up, that really get sick of this market, that really, you know, are just over it and they can't figure out what's going on. It's because deep down inside, they knew that the first 2 or 3 times they made an offer, they actually didn't put in their highest and best. What it was is they wanted to make sure they weren't overpaying for a property. They got beat out a few times and then they start making the best offer possible. I don't know about you, but the last thing I want you guys to do is waste your nights, evenings, and weekends going out looking at properties and not putting your best foot forward. So now that we're done with our meeting today, that's all I have to talk about with multiple offer situations and such. Do you guys have any questions? And are you prepared to go out? I got to deliver this, Harry.
Sorry.
No, I'm just kidding.
No, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to say anything.
It is my punchline. Are you guys ready to go out and put your best foot forward? Like if we found a house right now, would you be willing to give it your best shot? Now I know we don't know what house that is, but I really want you guys to be prepared for that. So I appreciate you guys sitting down with me, blah, blah, blah. Let's go have a beer. Let's go do that. Let's get this eerie like feeling out of the air. And Harry, go.
No, I was just agreeing with you. I was going to say, you know, it's like I want them to do some soul searching, right? Because what I don't want you to be is house poor so that you hate the house, but I want you to make sure that you know what that best offer is the best that you can do, because that'll help us decide where we're going next. But you hit it perfectly.
Bingo, bango. Do you guys get that? You guys will be showing maybe 3-4 houses before you guys start writing offers, and you might start writing only maybe 3-4 offers at most. I'm telling you, if you guys, every buyer, Melissa, are you still here?
I'm here.
How many offers did you take?
7, I think.
When do you feel like they started putting in their actual best foot forward?
After the 4th one, probably, or at the 4th one.
Yep.
So yeah, this would have helped tremendously.
And then and then right there, you're only really writing about 3 or 4 offers.
Yeah.
Yep. So, and I apologize, guys. It's so hard to teach you guys everything that's going on, and we only have so many hours and weeks in the day. But, you know, Melissa and Brady have been through hell and back with their buyers. And Brady, I gotta say, is probably dealing with somebody that I could have this expectation conversation with until I'm blue in the face. And his buyer still may not want to put his best foot forward, even with the verbal, of course I'm going to put the best foot forward. And then when they put their, you guys can't see me, quote unquote, best foot forward, it isn't their best foot forward, and you know it.
It's so I sent him a property today, and he was like, "Oh, with everything that needs done, it's not worth what they're asking for." I'm like, "It doesn't matter." Like,
yep.
No, and Bruce, interesting. I met an agent who left Fort Collins, but they were at the Fort Collins at the time, and they had this little like chart, and he would show if we added $5,000, you know, if you can only afford 400, here's what 405 would look like. Here's what 410 would look like. Here would 415 look like, so that they could then go back. And he gives them that chart, and he says, "I'm going to call you tomorrow. Let's talk about your highest price." I thought it was brilliant. I wished I would have taken it from him. I didn't, but it was a great chart. And that way you can give that to your buyers and say, "I want you to look at this because," and then, you know, sometimes a stretch goal is what could you stretch to? And then we know we're comfortable with whatever offer we go in. And if it takes 4 or 5, then so be it. We know we're at that top. Yep. It's almost what Bruce was talking about. It's just like you know, some people like to be able to see that. And it was a great tool. I wished I would have taken it.
Thanks, guys. I'm supposed to be teaching a class out in Kansas City. Just realized, take later. I will upload this to YouTube soon.